His wife is actively giving birth while he's here.
I'd like to give a shout out to my wife who's in labor.
Yeah.
Dude, you're not getting paid that much. Why are you here? Your kid's gonna be like, hey dad, why'd you not see my birth for $5,000? Hello everyone and welcome to MMA Start to Finish. I'm Julian and this is Matt.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about UFC 14 Showdown in Birmingham, Alabama, held at the Boutwell Auditorium, which they told us was constructed in 1924. Been around for almost 100 years in 2019.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's still there.
We're noticing a recurring trend too now. Now that the UFC has been banned from a lot of cable providers, has been made illegal in New York, the UFC is starting to find its home in the South. For the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of UFC events take place generally in the South, whether it be Georgia or here in Alabama. We're going to see it a lot in Alabama. So get used to the sights and sounds and history of Dixie.
Yeah. It doesn't help them, though, that they're having this event in July.
Yeah, it must have been hot as balls.
Yeah, we even had at least one person wearing a gi.
Yeah, fuck that.
I can't imagine it.
I'd rather get hit by a car.
At this point, I think it was like a 70-year-old building. Not 70, more like 80.
Yeah, I doubt they had, like, competent air conditioning.
Yeah.
Before we get into the layout of the fights tonight, we have some new rules to tell you guys. Now, did they create a graphic for us to use to show you these rules? No. Did they mention them in the part of the broadcast where they went over the rules? No. They just mentioned them in the middle of the first fight. So unlike them, we're actually going to mention the rules before the fights, because that's kind of important.
Yeah.
So, the new rules are as follows.
You have to have gloves on. Not boxing gloves, but MMA gloves.
Yeah, I think I read on Wikipedia that was you could choose 4 or 6 ounce gloves, which is not a huge difference. So, standardized the garb a little bit.
Yeah. Shoes are still optional.
Shoes are optional, but you can now kick with shoes. But, another new rule, you can't kick a downed opponent.
And that doesn't seem to be the clearest thing, because, like, people seemed afraid to kick or knee when they're on the ground.
Yeah, you can, like, if you can still knee on the ground, clearly, because we see that a lot. But I think the rule was put into place to stop, like, Pride-esque stomps, where you're just, like, curb stomping people into the next galaxy.
Yeah.
Because that looks really bad, and when your sport's in legal jeopardy, you don't want to have, like, what looks like sanctioned gang violence in your cage.
And going in that same direction, no hair pulling, which we only saw once or twice anyway.
Yeah, it never wound up being a huge deal, but no hair pulling.
Yep. And no groin shots, which
we did see a lot back in the day.
We saw a lot of that.
Used for justice sometimes in the case of a certain manager turned fighter turned felon.
Yeah.
But,
Yep.
We're past that.
The jewels will stay safe as much as they can be.
One notable change in nomenclature, they've changed it from lightweight to middleweight. It's still the same weight class, just under 200 pounds. Those are the only distinctions still, but they've changed the naming. And in the middleweight tournament for the night, we have Yuri Volin taking on Joe Moreira, and we have Todd Butler taking on Kevin Jackson. More about them later. In the heavyweight bracket, we have Mark Kerr taking on the returning Modi Horenstein. I think he was the IDF guy.
Yeah, he was Israeli forces.
Well, like, everybody born in Israel has to join the military, so they're like all IDF guys, definitionally.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have the debut of Bobish, a character who we'd come to love, and the return of Brian Johnston, but this time with bleach blonde hair.
Yeah. Daniel Bobish. We do have to say his name at least once.
We do have to say his full name. We just called him Bobish because it's a great name, but his name is Daniel Bobish.
It'd be kind of wild if his name was just Bobish.
He just had one name?
Yeah.
Dude, there's some, like, super tangent, but there are some Brazilian soccer players who just go by, like, one name in, like, Europe or in America.
I mean, if it's unique enough that you can do it.
I mean, I don't know what I have like speculation about why they might do that, but I don't actually know. Like sometimes I've come to learn from watching MMA, it's common in Brazil to have like 4 names, so that shit would get a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like Antonio Rodrigo Minotauro Nogueira. Like, come on. That's too much to put on a jersey, bro. Like, how much of that are we supposed to put on there? So
like,
they just call him by one name.
Like, if you're really good at it, at what you're doing, and one of your names is Minotauro, I would take that.
Yeah, Minotauro is pretty great, but
yeah.
we will meet him later once we journey to Japan. In the main event, we have the first ever defense of the heavyweight title. Mark Coleman taking on the debuting Maurice Smith. Now, to somebody just watching UFC fights, you would think, who's this Maurice Smith? Who's this guy? Why is he skipping the queue? Where's Randy Couture? Where's Don Fry? Etc. But if you had been watching all of the other ragtag promotions in the 90s, you'd know that he's kicked almost everyone else's ass, not in the UFC.
That was pretty much my take on it of, I don't know who this man is. Why is he here? Why does he get to fight the champ?
And in the context of this show, we haven't seen him before. So, like, if you hadn't seen this stuff, you wouldn't know who he is.
Yeah.
And we're not watching, we do have some semblance of a life. We're not watching Cage Rage on Fight Pass. We're not going to do it.
We don't have that much free time.
So Joe Moreira, we're actually seeing return. We saw him last taking on an opponent before there were weight classes, fighting Paul Varlins, who was nearly double his size. Now he is an opponent who's actually his size. Yuri Valin was a boxer who had no grappling experience.
Nope. And he kind of bragged about it, too. But
I don't know if he bragged about it, but he certainly didn't try to hide it.
Yeah. He seemed very confident that he could keep it on the feet. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, dude gets taken down almost immediately, and you'd think, oh, man who doesn't know how to grapple is taken down by, I'm pretty sure, jiu-jitsu black belt. So you'd think he'll advance position in him out, which he did, and from there, he'd go on to get him in a head and arm choke, or an arm bar, or an omoplata, maybe get fancy with it. No. That would not be what happened. Do you want to tell us the story of this fight?
Well, if you're on YouTube and you're watching this is what you saw the entire fight.
There was, I believe, one stand-up because Joe held mount for 8 minutes and didn't do anything. Even Big John couldn't tolerate that. He had to stand them up. That really didn't achieve anything because,
they went straight
another
back down.
takedown almost immediately, where he would proceed to hold him in mount again until the end of regulation.
Yep. Yuri figured that he could use a lot of fakes to get a good punch in before any ground action happened.
Nah, bro.
Can't do any fakes when you're on your back.
You gotta at least learn, underhooks. So I went on like a little bit of a rant during the fight that I'll try to like repeat for this. So the one thing I was thinking about that would make sense with Joe was like, this strategy makes sense if you're trying to preserve yourself for the next fight. That would make sense to me. But at a certain point, man, you gotta take some chances. There's a difference between, some people can't make the distinction between like grappling to advanced position and like try submissions and like stalling grappling. Even somebody who can make that distinction is like very frustrated by Joey's actions here.
He just had so much time to do anything.
Like, literally try any submission attempt.
Against a guy who doesn't have any ground game whatsoever.
Like, what is he worried about? Is he worried about losing position? What, does he think he's not going to be able to take him down again?
Yeah.
It sure didn't seem like a problem. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, they went into overtime, and the same old story, same old song and dance. Another mount stall till the end of overtime.
Yep. And he didn't do much other than that, and Yuri couldn't really fight back on
at all
on his back. So they pretty much stayed like this. We were looking at the screen the same way Big John is looking at them, and he kind of just won by default because he had the top position.
I mean, one of the like tertiary criteria for judging is position, and this is great. Mount's a great position, so if that's the only thing we have to work with, I guess he wins.
Yep. So our second middleweight fight has Todd Butler versus Kevin Jackson. And Todd is a local boy to us, at least. He's from Pennsylvania.
Did you catch the name of the town he was from? It was like I know I have one of the screensavers on my computer is a map of PA with city names. I've never heard of the place he's from.
It's probably just bumfuck Coal Town.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No offense to...
No disrespect. We're
Yeah.
like in borderline Pennsylvania, so we can't talk too much shit.
Yeah. Whereas we have Kevin Jackson. I can't remember exactly where he's from.
I believe he was from Nevada or Arizona, one of those two.
Arizona sounds closer to being correct. But he's never been hit before.
Well, he said he'd never been hit in a fight before. He'd been hit, he said, in training and stuff, but he'd never taken a shot in a fight.
But training's different.
Yeah, that's what he said too.
Yeah. So, this is his first time getting hit for real.
He openly states that in his interview, which I guess, in 97, there's no threat of your opponent ever seeing that before the fight. So you're not worried about, like, giving away secrets. But it does still strike me as, like, a very strange thing to admit on camera. Like, hey, I'm about to get here in what they call reality combat, and I've never been, punched in the mouth before.
I mean, they could surmise that he doesn't have a fight record.
Yeah.
So they can be like, well, he probably doesn't have any real experience fighting. But not so blatantly, at least.
Well, he does have a lot of experience in amateur wrestling, though.
Yeah.
We saw on the broadcast, they actually mentioned, you'd think they would have lampshaded this better since it's a pretty big deal. He's an Olympic gold medalist, and they kind of mentioned that like they were mentioning his hometown or something. It wasn't that big a point of conversation. But Kevin Jackson won 2 medals in the Pan Am Games, I believe, 2 medals in the World Championships, and a medal in the 92 Olympic Games in Barcelona. All gold, all before he ever debuted in the UFC. So he's a specialist, very obviously.
Yeah.
And Todd Butler had a very opposite style. He was a Kempo karate practitioner. We didn't get to see a lot of that karate on display, however.
They said Todd was a hard hitter and likes to get aggressive. Or he said he likes to get aggressive.
They all say that.
Yeah.
Let's be real here.
Well, he said that he gets too aggressive sometimes and that he loses himself.
I believe that actually might have been his downfall in this fight. I was actually expecting some well-rounded stuff out of Todd because they mentioned that he had a lot of different experience in different disciplines. He had done, obviously, karate. He had done boxing and kickboxing. He'd fought in Valley Tudo. He'd done Muay Thai. They said he even had, like, high school and collegiate wrestling experience. So he sounded extremely well-rounded. But I guess when you're taking on an Olympic gold medalist, if your wrestling isn't real top-notch, it doesn't matter how well-rounded you are.
Yeah. The high school level does not work.
Dude, even the collegiate level is like... It would be like you and me trying to play 2-on-2 against like Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. It just like wouldn't work. So Todd was a little prophetic in how he described his fighting style because he did rush in with a kick, I believe, and Kevin scooped him up and took him down, and from there proceeded to advance to back mount, where in 1997 you could rain down blows on the back of your opponent's head, which he would do to great effect.
Yeah, because the choke wasn't working, so he just starts beating down on him, and then John stops the fight because
I believe he tapped here on Wikipedia because there was a couple fights that ended in this similar fashion. Some of them by stoppage, some of them by verbal tap or submission to strikes. This was one of them. This was one that ended to submission.
All right.
But yeah, I mean the ending looks the same. You just see Big John running in.
Yeah.
The effect is the same, really. So Todd Butler would lose to Kevin Jackson in 1 minute and 27 seconds to strikes. And here is that accompanying photograph, if you're on YouTube, of Kevin Jackson engulfing I almost called him Todd Howard. Todd Butler.
Punching the idea of Skyrim into his brain.
Up next, we have the first fight in the heavyweight tournament. We have Modi Horenstein taking on the Smashing Machine, Mark Kerr. Modi returning from previous events. I think he was Mark Coleman's first opponent, I believe. And back then chose to not wear a gi. Modi was the one who wore a gi. We mentioned the gi earlier.
Yeah, he came out in a gi, already sweating.
In July,
yeah,
in Alabama.
Everyone's sweating. He's sweating buckets.
So, we have some fun facts to read from Mark Kerr's Wikipedia page. Before he entered the UFC, like many of these fighters, he participated in Vale Tudo. And in Vale Tudo, he had his first 3 fights all in one night, like a maniac, and all of them are notable. Do you want to read for us?
Sure.
You can just read the whole entry, yeah.
It's short.
It's 2 sentences.
Mark Kerr's first professional MMA fight was at the World Vale Tudo,
You got it, yeah.
Tudo Championship 3, where he won 3 fights. In the first, he broke his hand, but continued to fight against Paul Varlins, the polar bear, winning via TKO by strikes. In the second, his opponent,
Meister Hulk, which sounds like a fake-ass name.
Yeah, literally crawled out of the ring to avoid Kerr's brutal ground and pound.
That's excellent.
In the final match, a savage half-hour brawl, he punched with a broken hand and kneed and headbutted and elbowed his way to a victory against Fabio Gurkel,
who we've seen before. I don't remember in quite what UFC. I can check for you.
I think it was like 2 ago.
Yeah, it was UFC 11, so we're familiar with him. He lost to Jerry Bolander, and he also lost in a half-hour slobber knocker to Mark Kerr.
Yep.
So Mark Kerr is joining us in the UFC, taking on Modi, and this fight was very, very similar, actually, to Kevin Jackson versus Todd Butler, if you think about it.
Yeah, it pretty much ended the same way of getting on his back and beating him into giving up, or someone stops it.
A quick takedown from the superior wrestler, that being Mark Kerr, obviously, and some very violent knees to Modi, followed up by strikes to, I don't know if it was the back of the head or the side of the head, it doesn't really matter, elbows to Modi, sending him packing back home, and a thunderous debut for Mark Kerr.
Yep. So between the end of this fight and this next fight, we get commentary saying that Joe Moriera.
Close enough. Yeah.
I'm sorry. We get some of these names wrong.
No, I'll be real. Some of these names are kind of like ridiculous for English native speakers to say. Like, no disrespect, we're not going to be able to pronounce everything right. And that's like, that might be right. I'm just not sure. That's why I say close enough, because I'm not sure.
I'll just go by his first name for now. Joe, they said he broke something at this point, or that he hurt himself.
Well, they were being kind of unclear. It sounded like Joe said that he had broke something in his hand, but then when he pressed him on it, he said that the doctor said he had a concussion. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
It all struck us as very weird.
So, ends up that they need an alternate, even though Joe stayed in a full mount the entire time.
I'll be real with you guys. During Joe's fight, we were getting a little frustrated with his stalling tactics, and I've seen this before, but I forget I don't remember every single detail, obviously. So I said, wouldn't it be like kind of karmic if he, somehow in his stalling 15-minute decision got injured and wasn't able to continue? And what do you know? He's not able to continue.
The one thing that he couldn't defend, as well as everything else, was probably his forehead, and that got headbutted a bunch.
That was probably it, yeah.
But we both kind of agreed that his idea for this fight was to just hold and wait it out, so he didn't get injured. He got injured anyway.
And that backfired. That did not work at all.
Yeah.
Sucks to suck, Joe.
Yep.
In the second leg of the heavyweight tournament, we have Daniel Bobish taking on the returning Brian Johnston. We have some fun information to share with you about Bobish as well. So, another wrestler in his collegiate days, he also played defensive tackle for Mountain Union and later had a tryout with the Cleveland Browns. So, if you haven't seen UFC 14 and you're only hearing our telling of it, you're probably wondering, wow, it's a big dude. He almost played in the NFL. Yeah, his back looked like the Appalachians. It was ridiculous.
He is a huge man. He is very wide.
He could probably like smuggle a human in his traps. Like, it's ridiculous.
No, he's not like.
He doesn't look like really steroided out either. He just looks jacked.
Yeah, he doesn't look like Mark Coleman, and he doesn't look like Paul Varland's, but he's just like a very big man.
Also, the biggest man we have in the heavyweight tournament, weighing in at, I believe it was something around 315, 317.
310 pounds, which gives him a 78-pound advantage over Brian Johnson.
A fun fact about Bobish before we get into the fight, he now lives in his hometown of Cleveland and has been promoting local fights since 2010 when he founded Ultimate Cage Battles. Also, Bobish was once a sparring partner and bodyguard for Mike Tyson. So this dude probably has some dope stories to tell at barbecues.
I wonder if he got to pet the tigers.
Dude, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to meet those tigers.
I want to pet the tigers.
I don't.
I mean, like, I say that, but then when I'm in a room with them,
When you're in a room with Mike Tyson and a tiger, I wonder which one you feel more safe around. So the fight begun with an exchange on the feet, both of them looking to throw some power shots, especially the large Bobish. Bobish would then go in for a takedown and end up on top of Brian Johnson. At first, it had looked like Brian shot up to try and like pull guard, but that's just my modern eye being anachronistic because nobody was trying to pull guard in 1997, especially nobody that's not explicitly a jiu-jitsu practitioner. So upon replay, we would both see that he just got scooped up and slammed down.
So it ended up in a weird submission for Bobish, where he just kind of pressed his entire front, or like at least half of that body,
forearm?
right? Yeah. With his forearm into Johnson's neck.
And Johnson would submit, but we would never get any real clarity as to what he tapped to. From this angle, and this was the angle that made me think it was a head and arm choke, that's what you would believe, it's a head and arm choke. But officially, it sounded like they said it was a standard forearm choke, and from the camera to the right of Bobish's head and the left of Brian's head, it was more ambiguous about what was really going on down there. But either way, the Mountain strangles the man in the corner and moves on to the finals of the heavyweight tournament to take on Mark Kerr. And we have two Rock'em Sock'em robots. It's perhaps not the best analogy. It's more like the Hulk and the Thing meeting.
Yeah, these are good God, they're big.
There's a lot of density in these men.
Yeah, and they're not even, it's not bar big, like Tank versus Ferguson.
No, this is like power lifter big.
What was Ferrozo?
Ferrozo, yeah.
I got a modern fight on my mind.
Yeah, we just watched UFC 238. We saw Cowboy and Tony Ferguson. But anyway, tangent.
Ferrozo and Tank, they're big, but they're fat big.
Yeah, they're like, I like to drink beer big. These guys are like, I like to do military press big.
Yeah. By the way, so this time, this is where we actually got to hear from Joe and not just the commentators. Joe Moriera.
And Joe Rogan.
The Joes had a conversation.
The Joes had a meeting.
Yeah, and Fighter Joe said that he felt fine, but he got the concussion. But also, just kind of casually...
Plainly stated.
Well, not... He did want to put a shout-out to his wife, but it came off pretty casual. Maybe that was the concussion talking. That his wife is actively giving birth while he's here.
I'd like to give a shout-out to my wife who's in labor.
Yeah.
Dude, you're not getting paid that much. Why are you here? Your kid's going to be like, hey, Dad, why'd you not see my birth for $5,000? Probably not even that. Let's be real. It's probably, why'd you not see my birth for $500?
I was busy laying on a man.
Yeah, I was busy getting a stalled decision. Anyway, I'm not going to beat up on Joe Moreira, but it just strikes me as a very strange choice to make.
Yeah. Well, birth's weird.
I'll put it now. He's real dedicated.
Yeah.
He's real dedicated to his craft. So, with the exit of Joe Moreira, we would see the entrance of an alternate. Now, given that his alternate fight was under 2 minutes, much like Tito Ortiz's alternate fight in UFC 13, they showed us his alternate fight again. Or they showed the alternate fight again, rather. And it wasn't super notable. He had... the alternates were Anthony Strickland, and did you catch the other guy's name? I didn't write it down.
Something Chapel.
Yeah, so Strickland looked like he was like an actual fighter, and the other guy looked like he taught karate in a mall. Like, yeah. I don't want to be mean, but like, there was like a clear real life fighting experience gap between these two guys, and Strickland would expose that, and after getting like a weird, I don't know if it was a can opener submission or if it was a head and arm. Not that was what's super important. What was super important was after the tap and after alternate referee, because Big John wasn't in there, begun to pull him off.
He just punches him
He
again.
just fucking punched him in the face for no reason.
And then when he gets up, he steps on
on him, and then he shoves him and like swears at him.
Yeah.
Like a complete dickhead. And while Big John was not the official for this fight officially, he was having none of that shit in his fucking octagon. Would storm in there and give Tony a stern talking to in the corner, letting him know there would be none of that shit if he saw another fight.
Yeah.
Because at this point, he wouldn't know if he was fighting again. It was the alternate. And I'm sure literally all of UFC administration was like, I sure hope this asshole doesn't have to fight, especially when our sport is in like legal trouble.
Yeah.
And this dickhead said later, like, oh, I just couldn't turn off the switch between like a street fight and competition. Which, sorry, bro, maybe don't, do active competition then. Maybe not for you.
And the entire stadium was booing him, which he didn't really help.
He immediately became a villain, yeah.
Because he just kind of waved off everyone as if they don't matter. But you gotta please the people if you want to be in here.
I like it's one thing. I like if, there's something out of the fighter's control that they're being booed for in the modern day where they kind of like let the fans have it. I think it was Jared Cannonier when he beat Anderson Silva a couple months ago and Brazil was booing the shit out of him. He was like drinking it in and it was kind of great. But that's one thing. It's another thing when you were like actively a dickhead and then you're not apologetic until like you're, until Big John talks to you like you're 12.
Yeah.
So, a little, not the best first impression for Tony Strickland.
Eventually, Strickland does apologize. Like once he's out of the ring and is with Joe Rogan this time, not
Moreira.
Yeah.
Joe Moreira did not take over backstage commentary for Joe Rogan.
No. So we got young Rogan getting the apology from Strickland. So he did eventually.
He did apologize, and I understand what he was trying to say. It's just they're on thin ice already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Strickland would step in with Moreira out to take on Kevin Jackson. And I think literally everyone there was cheering for Kevin Jackson when this fight began. And this fight went about as quickly as the last three, about the same proceedings. The one notable thing was that Strickland turned his back to Jackson and just was like, here you go, please take me. And then he climbed on top and he yanked him down. And it looked like he was going to go for the same type of finish he had in his previous fight, where he struck from back mount. But this time he was actually able to get under his neck where he would sink in the choke. Yep. By the way, we haven't mentioned this to this point, but I do want to give a shout out to Kevin Jackson's excellent I Am a Real American shorts.
And because this fight was so short, I think it was like 40-something seconds, they ended up having They showed a replay of the finish, and
I forgot about this. Yeah.
They slowed down the footage, but they kept the audio, so it was like having the Mortal Kombat voiceover saying what was going on.
It was Bruce Beck's voice in super slow-mo, where in real time he was like, "Oh, what a knee!" and in the replay it was like, "Oh, what a knee!"
Yeah. Like, we can't do the Mortal Kombat voice.
I can. That's about the closest approximation I can do. And if you watched it, you heard it, and it was probably equally jarring to you as it was to us.
Yeah, it was very. We both looked at each other like, "Oh, what's going on?"
Yeah,
here?
we both thought we had like a simultaneous stroke, and then we had to, or we rewound, and we're like, "Did that really happen?" And it was confirmed. It really did happen. That was probably the worst editing we've seen yet in terms of audio.
But anyway, Jackson gets his medal. Not a belt, but a medal.
They keep saying title, when they're talking about these fights, trying to hype them up, but they should probably be more careful with their verbiage now that they have actual titles at play, even though there is no title for the middleweight division yet. But Kevin Jackson definitely has established himself as a top contender. Up next, we have the finale of the heavyweight tournament. Mark Kerr taking on Daniel Bobish. And the mountains collided, and it was pretty glorious. Early, Mark opened with some leg kicks, which were interesting and were, foreshadowing of events to come later. But things would, much like the latter fights, all involving wrestlers, quickly proceed to the ground.
Yep. Kerr takes on, kind of tackles just Bobish to the ground.
Yeah.
And gets in his side guard. Then gets a side mount. Just hammers into Bobish. Bobish does try to retaliate. Doesn't end up going too well. And Kerr starts going in and gets I guess it's a choke. It just kind of looked like he squeezed the shit out of Bobish's head.
We'll see what they have on Wikipedia here. Again, I wrote down head and arm choke because it's very unclear. What do they have here? Chin to the eye. What the fuck? I'm just noticing this now. Am I crazy, or is that what that says?
He did say that he was having...
I guess that's legal.
He was, touching his eye a lot.
Yeah, he got hit in the eye or something. That's hilarious. We are realizing this in real time. He ended this fight by literally digging his giant chin into Bobish's orbital.
He just squeezing him in.
That's extremely mean.
Rubbing his chin in at the same time.
All the new rules couldn't account for that, I suppose.
That's rude. But
perfectly legal. How is it different from digging your knuckle into somebody's eye, you know what I mean, when you punch them in the face?
Yeah, I guess.
So Mark Kerr would reign supreme, obtaining a gold medal and establishing himself as a contender in the heavyweight division for the UFC. At the time of this recording, I discovered something interesting on Twitter the other day, and I'm not sure if it's legit or not, so I'm actually kind of asking for your guys' help in determining if this is real or not. I found a GoFundMe for Mark Kerr on GoFundMe, and it seems I have signs of this seeming real and this not seeming real, but I don't want to judge either way because I'm unsure. But I'll just read out some of the stuff. Apparently, Mark Kerr has been diagnosed with peripheral neuropathy and has been unable to work. And this GoFundMe, I believe, is just asking for help, paying for bills and stuff.
Yeah, it's not a crazy amount. It's $4,000.
Yeah, it's not for some surgery or something. It's just help because unfortunately, a lot of these fighters that we cover were not paid lucratively for these really damaging fights that they had.
Yeah.
This GoFundMe was created in April, and given that Mark Kerr is a pretty notable fighter, I thought I would have seen this maybe shared around by some of the MMA media personalities that are really popular and big, but I haven't seen anybody share this, so I don't know if this is real. I'm not going to include the link in the description of the video, but if you just Google Mark Kerr GoFundMe, you will find this. And if anybody has any information conclusively one way or the other about whether this is real, please do comment below. Yeah. We'd love to know.
Because we checked his Twitter, we checked his Facebook. He's 50-something, so I don't really expect him to have a great social media platform.
Yeah.
Nothing immediately pops up when you just Google his name alone.
Yeah, there's no news about it, but it's not again, it's not anything crazy he has to have some really crazy surgery. It's just he probably has some nerve damage and isn't able to do... He still probably has a normal-ass job.
Yeah.
And isn't able to do that because of his nerve damage and just needs help paying for basic things.
And also, in the time when we're just looking through this and then updating it, there's...
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted to mention this, but yeah, I guess we can go ahead and mention this.
Anyone can put their name down.
In GoFundMe? Yeah.
But we see Ensign Inoue,
who is a UFC fighter who I know did fight in Pride during the same time frame where Mark Kerr fought in Pride. So they would be people who knew each other. And anyway, I don't want to go down too big of a rabbit hole here. But yeah, this is a thing that exists. If you have any information about it, please share with us. And if it is real, consider donating.
Yeah. And if it's not real, please let us know so we can say so in the next episode.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Up next, we have the main event, the heavyweight championship defense of the Hammer, Mark Coleman, taking on the UFC debuting Maurice Smith, who had conquered the other promotions at the time.
Yeah. Going back to what we said earlier, I just thought he was just some guy who was good at, I guess, kickboxing, and was just coming in because they wanted a big name from another similar sport to come in. Turns out he has a long resume before he gets to UFC.
Yeah, so there's way too much for us to like actually run down everything one by one here. A really well accomplished kickboxing record of 71, or rather that's how many fights he has. 51, 53 and 13 with 5 draws. He had a brief foray into pro boxing that didn't look like it went too well, had 3 fights. And during his kickboxing days, had a non-title fight in Japan against Don the Dragon Wilson. I'm pretty sure that is the same Don the Dragon Wilson that was a commentator in some of these early UFCs. So that's a fun piece of trivia. That's not the only familiar name in his resume, though. He would go on to debut in the earliest days of Pancrase and actually was involved in one of the fights that seems like it was informational in forming Pancrase in 1989. So he was doing MMA fights before they were even an idea, really. So he would go on to compete in Pancrase against Ken Shamrock, Bas Rutten, and he would go on to train at the Lions Den, which is why in his corner for this fight we would see brother of Ken, Frank Shamrock.
So in their intro videos, we got all these different little tidbits from Maurice and a little bit from Mark. Not too much from Mark, actually.
Yeah, his whole thing was like, I am same, I'm here to smash, so.
Yeah. You know me, I'll do it again.
I am the hammer, he is the nail.
And speaking of hammers, Maurice didn't really seem to believe that hammer fists were a real thing. He just kind of thought that they were something that, like, schoolgirls do to fight each other.
To be fair to him, they were popularized by these early MMA fights, so they weren't really a thing, but, you know, when you've seen Mark Coleman turn people into sand, maybe you'd want to watch your mouth a little bit.
Yeah, Mark Coleman, the Hammer.
Yeah. You know, hammer fists.
Yeah.
Kind of goes pretty well together.
So, I kind of doubted him a little more after hearing that part. And for the first half of this fight, Mark is dominating. He dominates for probably almost exactly half of this fight.
Yeah, about like at least 7 or 8 minutes, right?
Yeah, where he's just all over Maurice.
He has clear control over him after a takedown, and early on, especially early, had some pretty gnarly ground and pound with some headbutts, some elbows.
But the entire time, Maurice is not letting up. Anytime he gets a chance, he just throws some elbows into the back of Mark's head.
And there are no restrictions on where you can strike your opponent. So he's able to throw those punches and elbows from 12 to 6 to the side of the head, the back of the head, wherever he pleases.
At one point, actually a few points, Mark tries to get a choke but loses them and just goes back to either guard, side control, or half guard, whichever one he ends up back in.
Yeah, during the early stages of this fight, Mark looked really dominant. He was just transitioning all over the place, from guard to side control to half guard. It was all over the place, but all that transition work apparently wound up wearing out Mark Coleman. As the fight progressed, Maurice Smith would eventually make his way back to his feet, and you could start to see Mark Coleman was a little gassed. Maurice got off a pretty good combination on the feet, but during regulation, Mark Coleman would again take down Maurice Smith and end the fight in not quite a stalemate position, but what he was doing earlier, where we would then head into the first of 2 3-minute overtimes for the championship fight. And in these overtimes, the fight completely changed. Mark Coleman was completely gassed. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see him here grabbing his knees, inviting a head kick, which he did not wind up receiving. But he did receive plenty of leg kicks, jabs, got pieced up on the feet. You could see bruising on the back of his legs. For the first round, Mark looked like he could, pose some kind of competent defense. Or the first overtime, excuse me. But by the second overtime, he was, he looked like a pedestrian. It was a problem.
Yeah, he was just a punching bag by the end of this fight.
Oh, we should note, I forgot to mention this. During the regulation period, when they were briefly stood up, Maurice threw a head kick.
True.
And to us, it looked like Mark wasn't grounded. It looked like his knee had come off the ground after shooting for a takedown attempt that didn't work.
I wish they would have showed some sort of replay video.
Yeah, they never really showed a replay, did they?
No, and
not like an analyzation replay.
Yeah, because Mark was getting up off the ground, I think his knees were off the
I
ground.
think so too.
Which would make it legal, but either way, he got a
foul.
Foul.
Yeah, which nowadays would mean that you got a point deducted, but the scoring didn't work like that back then. So what that wound up meaning was that they just warned Maurice sternly, and it was clearly like not dirty. It wasn't like it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
So they didn't. John didn't need to hold him against the cage like Tony Frickland.
Yeah.
So everything was copacetic. The fight moved on, progressed, and the tides would turn in overtime as the leg kicks would mount up. And with the strikes from his back when he was on his back and the domination on the feet, once the fight eventually went to the judges' scorecards, ladies and gentlemen, we would have a new heavyweight champion. If you're watching on YouTube, a little bit of technical difficulties as I forgot which was previous slide. Anyway, here's your heavyweight champion, Maurice Smith. He's having a jolly old time. The champion of the world.
He is the man. Though, one thing I did want to say was in overtime, things just got kind of crazy. Not even just with the fight.
Oh,
but
that's right.
The stadium itself, the lights kind of went out for like the octagon for a moment. They brought them back, but then they went out again. We're still, in the 90s, still some ramshackle production value, but for a fight that went to decision in 1997, that was entertaining. That was a good fight. I was starting to think like they were running out of time, and that was like the stadium owners telling them,
like, hey,
get out.
That was like when you're at a party and people flicker the lights, like time to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our next show will be a doozy. For the first time on MMA Start to Finish, we are covering Pride. I have no clue how long this event's going to be, and I have no clue how long the Pride podcasts are going to wind up being, because Prides are like, it's a journey to watch a Pride event. But boy howdy, if you thought UFC 1 was a glorious shit show, I cannot wait to show you the first Pride.
So everything that I've heard about Pride is it's this but wilder.
More of a circus somehow.
And I'm really excited to see that. I've seen nothing of Pride, modern or old, so this is all going to be absolutely new to me. I don't even...
You have no clue what to expect.
Yeah, I'm expecting like ladders to show up at some point.
Tune in next time to find out if ladders do indeed show up in Pride 1. Until then, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, please be sure to hit the like button, share it around if you enjoyed it. We certainly appreciate it. Also, to combat the sad people that think they're stumbling upon real UFC footage and are downvoting the videos, which is, comes with the territory. But it would be really appreciated if you enjoyed the video to hit a like and share it around. So, until then, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you later.
Bye, we love you.